Greetings, gamers. Tim Kirk here again, and I know it's been a while. The holidays have been particularly difficult this time of year because there's so many scheduling conflicts and so much going on. And I also have lost family members over this holiday season, and that has made it somewhat more difficult than normal. So I haven't been able to get to sit down and actually do one of these videos in a while. I was also rearranging my furniture, which I'm still not finished with, so please excuse the mess behind me. It's still in the process of being rearranged and shifted. We got the big furniture moved, but I still have little things that have to be restacked and reshelved, and it's crazy. So Hearts and Souls continues to be worked on. I really have this like hair thin sliver, as I've said before, left to do. But every time I get there, I'm like, oh, there's just a tiny bit more I want to do. And like there are times at night when I think of this brilliant new way to explain something, at least for me, or this thing I need to add, and then I go to sleep and I'm like, oh man, what was that? And I have to dig it out of my memory the difficult way sometime later and go, okay, I think I got it. Maybe, and then try and sit down and put it together again in the document. So there's some things that are getting changed slightly. Nothing big, but just how it is explained, like relationships. I have not explained relationships and how they function in the game mechanically well enough yet, and I need to work on that because the way it works fundamentally, and I'll tell you right now, is you have this pool of stress. Just like first edition, you have this pool. When it hits a certain point, it gets spent on something negative that impacts your character. Well, if you choose, you can take that pool of stress, however much there is, and dump it into one of your relationships instead. Now, your relationship doesn't have a stress pool of its own. I don't want to get that nitpicky about keeping track of points, because it's functionally just a way to explain where those points are going. They still become fallout, like I've discussed previously, on your character sheet, but it's fallout, relationship strained, or fallout relationship broken, or fallout relationship she now hates you, or he wants to murder you, or some horrible thing like that creates a situation that is troublesome or problematic. Those two words decided to go troublematic in my brain. And that was not what I was trying to do. I was not trying to create a new word that they just kind of rammed together as they were coming out of my mouth. Now, here's the thing. I'm trying to explain this simply and keep it together in the book, and without having to rewrite half the book, which I really won't, because I've done a lot of work. I mean, the current document, without art, without layout, without all of the little fancinesses of a layout artist, is over 130 pages, which means it's longer than first edition entirely, and that does not including the write-ups of villains. It is including the write-ups of animals and thugs, but there's no organization write-ups in there. There are no supervillains in there, and I'm not putting a lot of supervillains in this edition. In fact, I'm going to be one of those horrible people who says, if you really want to read about my world, there will be an additional book later. I don't want to do it, but I want to be able to produce a game that you take and you make your world and you run with it. So if somebody wants a bunch of supervillains and information on what the superheroes in the world were like, they can get those as an option. But if you're not interested in that, I'm not going to put it in the book and not going to make the book more expensive. So, people who don't want that don't have to see it, don't have to, disregard it or not. And that's always a fine balancing act, is how much do I want in the core book and want to make the core book big and important and wonderful, and how much are you willing to read? Which will go on to my second point, which has nothing to do with Hearts and Souls or anything else. Recently, a friend of mine and another author has started writing their superhero game, and I'm watching it with interest. I'm not sure it's going to go somewhere I like entirely, but I am watching it with interest. So far, they have come up with some really good ideas and then discarded them and come up with new, better ideas. So I'm waiting to see where they go with it as a general, as a group thing. There is one author who has vision, and there's a bunch of other people involved that uh, have interesting ideas. I'm sure they're sharing with the author in playtests, etc. Now, that's where I get to. I am a superhero game collector, so to speak. And that means that I will pick up the vast majority of superhero games when they come out. I don't get them all because sometimes there are ones that I'm like, no, that does nothing I want. Or I've had them before and there's a new edition and I'm like, do I want the new edition? I have an old edition and okay, no, I don't want that game. I've already got an edition. It works just fine. I'm not sure what they changed. Then again, sometimes I go back and go, you know what? I'll go get that new edition. It happens less after I took part in playtesting a bunch of new games a while back. I haven't done that recently, but a lot of it was because I could see them going a direction that was not interesting to me in the playtest. And I was like, oh man, they had a good game that I liked, and then they decided to veer to something else. Now, that made their fans happy, other fans, not me, and that's okay. I mean, you generally have to, as a game author, have to aim for writing to at least a group of your fans if you're wanting to make money. I, on the other hand, am writing for myself and wish to share that with you. And the reason for that is I learned a long, long time ago that if I'm not happy with the game I've written, 100%, I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to play it. So I write it. Why spend the effort writing a game that I'm not going to use myself? And there are a lot of games out there, a lot of games I've used, and some of them I like, some of them I liked for a little bit and then passed on. But in this case, I like my games. I like using my games for different things. Sometimes not even what they were intended for, but I do tweak them a little bit. And I do go back and try and enjoy them. Like right now, I'm burned out on fantasy. I really am burned out on fantasy, so I'm not interested in playing a lot of fantasy games or running a lot of fantasy games. That doesn't mean I'm not playing in one right now, but I'm kind of burned out. I do like the GM who's running it. I do like the take he's going on, but it's kind of somewhat overwhelming because we have a large number of players, and we also have people who think the only experience in role-playing is to punch the monsters until experience falls out, or hack the monsters until experience falls out, like an experience point pinata. Oh, with treasure. Yeah, it also has some treasure in there with the experience points. And that's never how I've been played. Never how I have played. Let me reword that sentence. Back in the early days when I was very young, I probably did a little bit, but to me it was always more about the getting into the character's role. I've always been that way. I want to play this person. Just like if I'm reading a book, I want to read about this person. I want to read about their emotional conflicts. I want to read about their physical conflicts. I want to read about the choices they make and the outcomes of those choices. I don't necessarily just want to see them kill something. And I tried to explain to somebody once, I have plenty of video games that if all I want to do is stab something with a virtual blade or hit them with a virtual stick and level up, I can go do that. No story involved, or very little story, just enough to string the game together. I've got several games that can do that. In fact, I don't want to name them here because, don't want to go overboard. But I've got a lot of different games that are pretty much just hack and slash on a console or on the computer and enjoy them. But I enjoy them in very limited amounts and get tired of them very quickly. And that's the thing. When you sit down at a tabletop game, I want something different than what video games can give me. And there are good video games out there that are getting closer to what I want from role-playing games, but they've not got there yet. And I don't think they ever will 100%, because there's a difference between sitting down and having a computer tell you a story and sitting down and have a person to interact with who can make changes on the fly as necessary to make it interesting. And now that runs into the problem of if your GM's good, he's going to be better than the computer. If your GM's bad, he's going to be worse than the computer. So, or as good as the computer, and you want better than the computer. My GM of the current game I'm playing is generally good. of the current one. I mean, I've got several games that are going and they're temporarily on hiatus, but they should be kicking back up soon since the holidays are done. Now, back to superhero games, which is what I was talking about. I have a lot of these on the computer and a lot of them on a tablet now. And I moved them off the computer because I haven't read them. I got them and I, skimmed them a little bit and thought these are good ideas. And then never sat down and read them in detail. I've got some other games like that too. And I decided to sit down and go through as many of the games I own as possible and read those. Some of them were free, some of them were very inexpensive, some of them I got in bundles of holding. And I encourage you, if you're interested in bundles of holding, to look those up, and because you can get a lot of games and game supplements cheap in PDF, electronic format that you can utilize to run games or whatever. But if you pick up bundles of holding, if you pick up other bundles or other groups like the ones that donate to charities, because Bundle of Holding does as well donate to charity, if you support those and get the games from them, read those games. Take the time out to stop, because I know, and I've seen that tendency before, I know people who have, bought dozens of games and downloaded them, and then they're like, well, unless they're playing it actively, unless they're running it actively, the game gets sent on the wayside, and they don't go back to it. They go look for another game. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do. But I encourage you to look at what's on your hard drive or look what's on your bookshelf. Yeah, my bookshelf is now over there instead of over there. But, look what's on your shelf. See if there's something there that interests you. Make use of what you've got. I mean, if you already spent money on it, it's great. It's essentially free by this point of the way you're utilizing the information that you have obtained. I'm not saying that not to get new games. In fact, I encourage you to get new games all the time if you find them interesting, because I'm still going to buy superhero games even though I've got dozens of others, because they all do something different and they all do something well differently. But I'm going through and making sure I'm reading them this time all the way through, getting ideas, seeing what worked for them, seeing what didn't work for them, and just enjoying them. And maybe I'll get the chance to play or run these. There's no guarantees, because my personal groups tend to play the games that I like because if I'm running them, or if they're running them, they choose the games they like, which are usually not one of the 15 or 16 different games I've got on my tablet at the time, but they might be. You never know. For instance, I've got Icons on my tablet as well as several Icons Adventures because I like Icons. I think it's a really good, well-done little simple game. It's not my favorite. It's up there, but it's not my top-end favorite. It's a very good game, and I suggest people get it, but there's others out there that are fun, too. Prowlers and Paragons is a pretty neat little game. Phase Rip, which is a clone of another older game that also has Phase Rip in it, but is not named that. And there are a lot, there are a lot of games out there. There are a lot of games of different subjects, genres, takes. I just saw a solo game called Quill, which is all about writing letters and using the inspiration of the game itself to write better letters. And that's it. I mean, you're writing literally a letter to somebody, but it's set up through what they call role-playing, and I haven't seen it. I don't know exactly how the rules work. I do know that it encourages you to write better letters, and that sounds like it's an interesting idea. I'm not sure if I would fully call it a role-playing game, but I'm not going to, pixel bitch, so to speak, about the titles and the subject people want to, put their games under these days, because if that's really how they want to title it, go ahead. I mean, the vast majority of people I play with are never going to pick up Quill. That's shameful in some ways, but it's not in others because it doesn't fit their tastes. And I don't say go buy something that doesn't fit your taste. Why do that? Why waste the time and effort and money and everything else? It may be one of the best games ever. I don't know, because it doesn't fit my tastes. If I'm going to write a letter, I'm going to write a letter, and I'm going to use my words, and that's pretty important to me. But I don't know. It may be a really great game. Maybe you should take a look and let me know. Anyway, until then, peace, good gaming, and I'll talk to you another time.